right now. So it's now recording. So you press that to actually let the attendees hear. So should we get going?
Okay, guys, we're gonna get started.
Okay.
Here we go.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the process that Coalitions Collaborating for Impact has gone through this past year around really learning more about how we can work and make change collectively together. So I'm going to share. I am James Gaines, and I talk to everybody in the room who knows me. And I am a member of the Calgary Downtown Coalition. I also am connected to the First 2,000 Days Network and have been working with Sammy on this presentation, who does evaluations for the network and is living in New York City. So just really excited to talk to you about this, and thank you very much to all of you showing up either online or in person today. And I'm having problems moving. There we go. So just to start, a little overview of the process that we took. Historically, the coalition coordinators have been meeting in Calgary and area for a number of years, quite some time. And prior to this past year, those meetings were really about sharing information with each other, networking, troubleshooting, support for the work that we were doing. But there wasn't necessarily a strategic focus to those gatherings. And in the past year, we've really moved from sharing for the sake of sharing to sharing intentionally. And that has allowed us to collectively design some quality standards and measures for the work that we do. So it's been quite enormous leap in terms of how we meet, how we work together, and what we achieved as a group. So where did we begin? Back late in 2015, as a group, we really began to ask the question, why do we come together for these coordinator meetings? And what is it that we're really trying to achieve here? And more importantly, what would it look like for us to start working together collectively? And so we really wanted to understand and experiment with how to do this, moving from the literature that many of us were familiar with around collective impact into our practice together. And there were three factors, I think, that really created fertile ground for this shift. The first was the backbone meetings of the First 2,000 Days Network. There were three coalition coordinators who consistently attended those backbone meetings for the course of at least a year. And as well, there were several other coordinators in the area that would drop in and attend those meetings if they could. And so, as you all know here in the room, a lot of the discussions at the backbone meeting tables are around linking, aligning, and leveraging within the ECD sector, and just a lot of rich conversation about what that might look like, how can we do that, how can we support that. So that really trickled down to the CCI, and those conversations that were happening here at the network. It became quite apparent that we were a smaller group of about 16 people that really had an opportunity to do that work together. It was also assisted by our new fiscal agent, which is the SFAA, because our funding application for 2015 also had a new framework that was attached to it. And so based on conversations that the fiscal agent had with coalitions across the province, the new guidelines for funding were based on 4 key areas of work. So that's knowledge mobilization, collaborative planning and partnerships, community engagement, and coalition development. So now we kind of have this roadmap of the areas where we're supposed to be working. And then the third key piece really was Sammy, who, as I mentioned, works for the network and evaluations, and she was graciously led to the CCI from the first 2,000 days network. And so having a facilitator to help chart this course was also, I think, a real contributing factor. That's okay. We can actually... Sorry. No problem. My notes say slide 3, speaking slide. So do we for the slide? Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Alex, for troubleshooting a few pieces here. All right. Let's see if I can move it forward. So what did the process take? No surprise that buy-in and ownership was a big one. Hold on one second. I feel like we're good. The buy-in and ownership piece, really, it was this group that defined its purpose and direction. So that came right from members at the table. The facilitation piece, as I mentioned before, was fabulous to have. Sammy was able to keep that larger vision around collective impact, ask critical questions, sort of keep us moving in that direction, and it allowed everybody else at the table to just really participate and engage fully in that learning. Time and time again, time comes up. It is a hugely, it was a considerable investment in time. And as you'll see, all of us feel very strongly that it was very worth the time. We met, just to give you an idea, monthly for a 3-hour meeting. And then in addition to that, as we started delving deeper into this, we realized that that wasn't going to be enough. So we often made the call to have full-day working meetings together. There's probably 3 of those throughout the course of the year. And then individuals at the table were tasked to meet in between meetings, to pre-plan for the next meetings and summarize what happened in those meetings. So there was a considerable investment of everybody's time and effort into the process. And as a result, though, an amazing outcome of all of that is that we really built capacity and leadership within the group. So each individual built their own capacity, the group capacity, to work together and tackle this, to not require outsiders to come in and provide their expertise, but that expertise could be found within the group. And then, it was really wonderful to see who would step up as everybody became more comfortable in their leadership roles. And, the coalitions are all at very different stages in their development. So some coordinators have been at this for quite some time and have more, years and events and experience under their belt, and others are very new to this work. So to see each person really grow in their own capacity and leadership is, I think, a major success of this endeavor. Largely for sustainability, because we have all recognized now that we can continue this work regardless. So our approach around developing the quality standards. Oops, back here. So basically the process, what did we do in all that time, is we started out with real intentional sharing. And then from there, we looked at various trends in terms of what we were sharing. And then we moved into actually defining those 4 key areas of development that I discussed and what it means to do that well. So we built tools, which I'll show you later, and created quality standards that all of us can now use to work together. That was the process. I'll delve more into this. And I feel like we skipped some. There we go. Okay, well, I'll just speak to the intentional sharing then. As I mentioned before, when we initially got together, we shared for the sake of sharing. And our first major learning is that if you share for the sake of sharing, it is pretty ineffective towards moving to working collectively together. And so really what we needed to do was share in a strategic and intentional way. So in our first meeting to do that, which was actually, this was a major aha meeting to me personally, what we said was, okay, great, we're going to start aligning, linking, leveraging our work. This will be quick and easy. We're all working in the same areas. We'll get sticky notes out, and we all brought our funding applications to the table to look at what we were doing in each of those areas. And so our very first meeting was around community engagement. That's one of the 4 priority areas. And everybody was tasked to show up and say, here's the work that I'm doing in community engagement. And then we then categorized to sort of figure out who was doing what. So you can see here that some individuals in their community engagement strategies were saying we attend or we host fairs and events within our community. And then it became interesting that, okay, so why do you do that? Well, some people do it to share information. Some people do it to build awareness of the importance of early childhood development around the knowledge mobilization people. Others are doing it to connect stakeholders. Some might be doing it to recruit new coalition members as part of their coalition development strategy. So very clearly, we thought, wow, this was going to be a quick and easy meeting where we would figure out where the commonalities are and get to it right away. And in fact, what we discovered is we do a ton of different activities for different purposes. And we have different definitions of what community engagement even is. Is community engagement really attending and hosting fairs? And so it looked quite different from coalition to coalition based on what they did, why they did it, and how they actually defined what they were doing. So this led us to ask some real critical questions. So quickly we moved to a place of, why are so many of our activities in community engagement really about building awareness and information, and much less about empowering people to act? And so as we delved into this further, that's when we recognized, we can't start to align or leverage any of our work until we're all talking from the same page about what quality work would look like in that area. So instead of continuing on with our sticky notes, we then decided that we would focus in on each of these 4 areas and develop quality standards around that. That was our next step. So from about April until August of this year, we used research. We really looked in and delved into the research around these 4 areas of work that we're engaged in, and then integrated our own experiences and learning to define these 4 priority areas and to determine now, how will we know if we're actually doing this right? How will we know if we're really making an impact? How do we know that this work is worth doing or even worth aligning around? And prior to that, we really didn't know except for what seemed to work or what felt good or, anecdotally, I suppose, what was being reinforced. And so this phase involved at least 2 CCI members meeting with Sammy in between meetings. And those CCI members were responsible for taking some time to do research and pull from other parts of the world, who's doing what in community engagement and how are they measuring those standards. And then we would look at the different tools and, use one if it fit really well, or piece together components from these various tools to what fit our experience. And all of the CCI members, as I mentioned before, were involved in that. So that was the real capacity building piece. And all those who were involved in this pre-planning piece said that those meetings were for sure their richest learning experience. So to take that time together and really delve into this stuff, the conversations that emerged from those were very rich learning experiences for all in the group. So this is just an example of one of the 4 quality standards that we developed. All 4 of them have sort of a strongly agree to strongly disagree rating scale that coalitions can use. And so this one here, I believe, is around quality coalition development. And so just for an example, the first one is our coalition has engaged the membership that we require to work toward our coalition's vision, mission, and values. And so as a coalition, do you strongly agree or strongly disagree with that statement? And then that allows coalitions to see where they need to invest some time and shift some of the work they're doing so that theoretically these are all in a strongly agree area. So this is just an example of one of the 4 that we developed. And I think that's why here really what we're saying is defining quality standards. So sharing meaningfully allowed us to define the quality standards, and then having the quality standards now really allows for more meaningful sharing. So it's been a very successful and reinforcing cycle now that we have those 2 pieces. So in terms of our key learnings and what really enabled our success, relationships is often a piece that comes up in this work. It was really critical. We had great relationships at the table going into it, so there was a level of comfort and understanding there. However, as a group, that really deepened. I think there were times as we went through this where, we had to work through challenges or differences or push each other to see things in new ways. And our conversations really became so much more open and honest as people really shared where they were at, how they understood things, and had those aha moments. So that was really important. I've talked about the facilitator quite a few times as a key component of what enables the success. The overarching framework was really helpful. Having those 4 priority areas, I think, allowed us right away to move to the question, we're all working in these areas, right? So how can we do this differently and work collectively? The culture of learning has been just an incredible growth and asset piece with this group because there's a genuine desire to continuously improve practice and meaningfully share with each other. So that's trying to understand how do we measure our work, and everybody at the table now is interested in doing that regardless. Regardless of whether it's asked for or not by a funder. Previously, I think some people look at it like, oh, this is something I have to fill out and do as part of our funding requirements. So really there's an understanding now that that learning cycle and evaluation piece and having those measures allows you to drive and work in a quality way. The openness and honesty in sharing was really huge. That culture of learning reduced isolation. So it can be difficult for coalition coordinators in different parts of the city trying to start out and get this work done. And we had some real sort of academic learnings. And one of the interesting pieces was initially when we all started with those stickies that I mentioned in our first meeting, people had, for the most part, most coalitions, looked at each of the 4 priority areas and stuck an activity in it, right? So maybe we, like an example might be giving books to families who need them. So that might be an engagement strategy. But you wouldn't see that again in the other 4 areas. So that's our engagement strategy. And our mobilization strategy is hosting play dates in community and sharing information that way. And what we realized when we went through this is actually each activity should rest in all 4 areas. So if you look at your playdate strategy, it should have a community engagement component to it. It should have a knowledge mobilization component to it. It should require collaborative planning amongst groups. So that was a real shift even in how we view and see our work. And then I've spoken to the sharing versus intentional sharing. So the challenges for sure, really the only one was time and resourcing. And we've learned as a group that it's so important to being able to articulate the value of the process and making sure that it's relevant to coalitions who are all starting at different times. Some coalition members couldn't attend, their coalitions couldn't give up their coordination time towards this. And so that, I think, was a piece for us, that it's so beneficial to engage the time because the quality of your work will be so much better. However, the resourcing piece is a real challenge for the coalitions. They're, to some degree underfunded in that respect, and there's not an investment per se in the capacity building piece. So that's something that we're starting to look together as a collective now. If we want to do this work and engage this work, how are we going to actually resource it so that we can do it? The impact piece, we have very clear goals as a group now. Our sharing, which is a precondition of the improved understanding of each other's work, is for sure a precondition of collective impact. And that is much deeper. We make way more less assumptions about each other's work. We ask questions like, how can we continue to build a strong collective voice where we can demonstrate and learn about our impact? We have an improved understanding of learning and evaluation, which I mentioned, and really an improved focus on that quality. What are coalitions best positioned to do within their communities? This is something we really looked at as a group. Where is our niche and where are we going to have the greatest impact? Coalitions have really questioned their own approach to their work. So this focus on learning is so essential to continuous improvement. And the quality standards also really provided an opportunity for coalitions to better express their work and how it relates to more traditional learning outcomes. So something that coalitions have found challenging is that so much of the work that coalitions are doing is relationship-based, and that takes so much time. And so to some degree, when you're on an annual funding cycle and you have to report back on what you're doing, it's been a difficult, I think, conversation for coalitions. So this process for a lot of people was very reassuring and uplifting in that there is so much research that supports that a lot of the pieces that coalitions are doing, particularly in that relationship building, is essential to working, and impacting in a collective way. And so having these quality standards now and having had that conversation, I think coalitions are so much more confident about advocating for how they do their work, and that they do link to these traditional outcomes, but we don't necessarily need to be assessed in a traditional way. And then the improved ability to collaborate. Just some examples for this application, which is being submitted in a couple of weeks. this group has decided that they really want to demonstrate that we're leveraging each other's ideas and that we have clear consensus on what the priority areas mean and what our collective understanding of quality and how we would measure that is. So we've made an effort that will be evident in all our applications going in. We actually just met earlier this week, and each coalition has devoted a line item into their budget to support, to some degree, our own collective capacity building, and what would that take. So that will be in all 15 or budgets going in across the board. We're also meeting again in November with the priority of really communicating in our final report what our impact has been, and we want to do that in a coordinated way. And we want to show that we understand and measure key priorities in similar ways, right? So here's the work we've done, here's how we understand it, here's how we're all measuring it in a coordinated way. And so I think I've mentioned most of the other pieces there. The improved ability to collaborate, sort of spoken to that throughout. Thanks, Alex. Well, yes, and so in terms of next steps, this chapter I've shared with you really has been about how we came together to define what quality standards are and how we need to measure our work and the best ways that we can be working together and working within our coalitions to achieve our objectives. So we now recognize that we really need the behavioral change piece. We have all the tools, but we haven't yet had the time to really implement those within each of the individual coalitions and start to shift the thinking and understanding with the members around the table into some newer ways of working. So we really need, now to do the quality engagement, our community engagement collectively that we set out to do, at the beginning. The linking, aligning, and leveraging piece, I guess, is what we're moving towards. So the major aha here is that we really will need to continue to build our capacity in that piece. And as I mentioned earlier, how are we going to advocate for that and resource that and make that happen? But that's what we will be moving towards now is in this next year, we'll re-engage in the cycle where we'll be looking at each of the priority areas again with now we have the definition, how are we going to move into implementation? I think that sums it up. So I don't know, I know Iris is here in the room. I don't know if there's anything I missed, Iris, or anything you want to add, or if there's any questions.
Well, I think one of the things that I really liked about the work is that we help shift the understanding to community development work that is so much a part of coalition development and our community engagement. I think sometimes when we come at the work, it's easy to not see that as a cornerstone of success and growth. So I like that we built in so much about community engagement and about collective impact generally.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because probably the biggest, I would say, speaking on behalf of the group, they would agree, certainly for me, the biggest whoa moment, kind of aha moment, was really when we realized, for the other priority areas, there wasn't as much of a difference in understanding of what they meant, right? So coalition development, to some degree or another, everybody at the table sort of had similar ideas or thoughts around what quality coalition development might look like. When we delved into the research on community engagement and looked at how it's defined in the research, really, point to Iris because she's been so helpful for all of us in this piece. For the most part, BONEF was the only coalition that was similarly aligned to the way that was defined. So for the rest of us in the room, it was some people are doing pieces of it, or there's been moments of it, or there's been some understanding of it, but to really link community engagement into a process, like an annual process of going to the community, having that inclusion, hearing those voices, having it filter out into your planning, going back, checking with, that piece was not sort of explicitly practiced among the coalitions, and there was quite a bit of anxiety around that because it's so difficult to do, and all of a sudden you have the right people in the room able to do that. And so what's so exciting is that everybody decided, well, if this is what it is, then we need to be doing it. So we're going to figure this out going forward, and that's the one we started with because we recognize that all of the other three come out of that community engagement process.
So if I got this right in my mind, we're talking the coalitions that were formed out of the government investment related to the EDI. Correct. And I think what you're doing here is exceptional because what it's doing is it's building that capacity within the coalitions to do some work. So if we understand the whole issue of collective impact, one of those, the tenets of that is continuous communication. So as you move forward and that you're getting the feedback on this work you're doing and how your the coalitions are working together and moving forward with your quality standards, that where do you loop back in the schools to let them know that the work that the kindergarten teachers did gathering the data that's informed the coalitions of the community has led to your opportunity to build capacity and engage community. Right? You may not be there yet, but I would respectfully suggest that might be something that you may want to be considered down the road is how do you loop back so you're almost closing the loop for the kindergarten. It's like we did the thank you video, right?
Right.
How they do the work, they've got the data for you. Now you need to let them know that this is not a useless activity that they're doing, that it is making a difference in community in that regard. That's just like, I don't know if that works down the road for you or not.
No, I think that's a great suggestion and realization of the coalition or the CCI, like the coalitions are gathered together because I think we have such a deeper understanding of what we're positioned to do and how we should do it well, and now we can measure what we're doing. There was no the funding would come, and there was no community engagement, but there was no sort of standards around that you reported back on. So it's been a very open-ended, broad scope, I think, for a lot of the coalitions to land on. And so I think that's a piece that is now that we have these in place that we will really move to that collective voice and be in a position to start sharing in a more coordinated way and advocating too in terms of, here's the work that happens and here's where we fit and here's, here's how we needed to be supported to do that. Like some of the things that we bumped up against, I think now we have an ability to speak to because of this more coordinated understanding.
And then when you say you have the right people at the table, right? I mean, I'm just thinking about, I don't know if anything come out of it, but the linking of the Northern Hills Community Association with the North and Northwest Central coalitions, there may be some potential opportunity for budget out of that organization to support that community work. I mean, who knows, right? But that's where you say, who's the right people at the table?
Right.
And people never even would have thought that somebody would have that to be able to support and use it as a vehicle to engage, further engage. Right?
I think you've done an outstanding job. And I think that if you haven't thought about writing this up, this needs to be published. Like you guys, this is amazing.
Well, Sammy did write up a really great case study.
Yeah.
We can,
No, I mean this needs to go into the literature. This is really important stuff. I mean, you've been given like direction from a government body, right? And you figured it out. And that just doesn't happen. In the systems world, people get directions, they follow, they march along, they do the check boxes off, and like this is really important. Really important. and how you've taken and gone to research. You know, you've gone together as a group to say, what does this mean? You know, so they gave us this direction, and this is what we've got to measure, whatever. Here's the 4 priority areas. What do each of these mean, and what do they mean to us? What does the literature tell us about what's the important thing to be measuring, and how does that look here on the ground? Mm-hmm. This is really important.
Yeah, it's been, I mean, I'm sure you say the same. I'm just so grateful for having had the opportunity, because I think I've been in situations prior in my work life where there's been an attempt to do this, and the level of buy-in and ownership and the amount of work that was produced, like even if you look and go through those quality standards, was actually produced by a group that meets, right? Like there was a real, like everybody's understanding and capacity to do this work grew in exponential ways. Everybody, you know, even people who knew what they were doing, right? And so I do think there's really something there.
And then presented back to you know, that they really have to do. Are other coalitions doing this? I mean, even the collaborative working together, what concept?
Yeah.
Well, I think this is our, like speaking here, this is our attempt to engage others sort of within the coalition world, but also outside, right? Like this is sort of our first step. This is our attempt to share what we've learned and how we can, you know, what that links to out there with others, because others are doing fantastic work in their own right, but we wanted to make sure we weren't holding this in or you know, that it can only be done in this way. It's like, well, this is what we've tried. You can learn from it and take from it. That's what we're about, right? You know, it's not ours to keep, right? So I think there's lots of opportunities for us to keep doing that, and it's kind of a good reminder, Leslie, that you know, when we do have things that are working and we can identify why they work, that's a useful thing to share. So just for those who are on the line, I know there's a little bit of sounds like typing or clicking. That's what we're trying to see. If anyone is typing in questions for Jane or Iris or for the group that's online. So sorry for the background clicking noises, but if you do have a question you want to ask, you can actually type it in, I think, to the questions area or to the chat area, and we'll just be very cognizant to click for a little bit so we can actually see what you're sending, and then stop clicking and actually answer your question. So if we want to open it up, or if we've muted all the people on the line just so we don't talk over one another. So I think typing in your questions is probably the best approach, and we'll try and keep the background noise to a minimum.
I'm hoping that one of you, either Iris or Jane or Juliana, will be able to come to that meeting with the kindergarten specialists from the school district, right? Even to sit and hear what they're saying, but also to share some of the work that you've been doing with coalition, so they see that there is movement going forward, right? So I don't know which one of you, but you guys are going to work on that. Okay.
Another question?
I just think, Joe's thinking, and I just think, you know, you've come such a long way, and it's really, really exciting to see all of this come together. And I think, you know, speaking from a broader, you know, more complex social issue perspective, that the learnings that come out of this are really applicable across sectors, not just in the first 2,000 days, but also to a lot of the community development learning initiatives, big social problems. And I think we, as a network, we can have ways to move that those lessons forward even further in our own network. Are there any questions from those online?
No?
Oh.
Try to
Yeah.
It was just a comment that there are other coalitions collaborating regionally. So, definitely we're linking and connecting with those other groups too and starting to hear about things that other coalitions are doing within their region.
And we're looking forward to perhaps their presentation on the webinar in this fashion so we can learn about that. I know that we had a work document from a coalition to the north of us that came our way, but we really didn't have the context to understand how it was developed or I guess in that sense then the meaning it could have for our work. So we're looking forward to having them present in the same kind of way. We can learn from them too.
Okay, well that I think brings us to a close. Thank you very much.
Job.
Thank you.